Congratulations. You've just paid $80 an hour to tell a stranger your deepest traumas, only for them to look at the clock and tell you, time's up. We've been gaslit into believing that talking about it is the cure. But look at the data. We have more therapists, more pills, and more awareness than at any other time in human history. Yet suicide and depression rates keep rising vertically. You aren't healing. You're becoming a high-yield asset in a multi-billion-dollar subscription model. They don't want to fix your soul. They want to keep it on a monthly billing cycle. And it gets worse. Let's stop the compassionate lies. The industry says they want to destigmatize mental health. But what they're really doing is medicalizing your humanity. In the US and UK, feeling miserable in a dead-end job isn't treated as a signal to change your life. It's treated like a chemical imbalance that needs a prescription. They've convinced you that your anger at a broken system is actually a disorder inside your brain. And once your pain gets pathologized, your power disappears. Instead of changing your life, you're handed a pill bottle. So ask yourself, is that really self-care? Or is it financial lobotomy disguised as medicine? The self-care movement isn't a revolution. It's a retreat. Think about why corporations love paying for your mental health days and meditation apps. Because it's cheaper to give you a mindfulness coach than to give you a livable wage, real freedom, or a sense of purpose. The elites don't need you healed. They need you numb, compliant, and just stable enough to keep clicking, scrolling, and consuming. A cured patient is a lost customer. And a person who discovers real meaning no longer needs a weekly session to validate their existence. Your trauma has become collateral in an industry that profits from dysfunction. And no one tells you this. So let's settle the debate. Are you really a warrior for going to therapy? Or are you a victim of a psychological pyramid scheme? A system where the more you work on yourself, the more problems you're trained to discover. We're told that seeking help is brave, but look carefully at the math. Who's actually brave? The person who stares directly at a rigged world and refuses to be numbed? Or the person who pays a professional to convince them that their misery is entirely their own fault? Because the truth behind all of this is about to get much, much uglier. Because once you finally see the invoice for a happiness that never arrives, you'll realize the couch was never a sanctuary. It was a cage. Stop crying and start counting. This isn't a medical field anymore. It's a stock market wet dream. Global spending on mental health is projected to reach $500 billion by 2030. And in the United States alone, the antidepressant industry is expanding faster than some of the biggest tech companies on Earth. But ask yourself the forbidden question. If these cures actually worked, shouldn't the market be shrinking? You don't keep buying fire extinguishers after the fire's already gone. They aren't selling you a solution. They're selling you a permanent seat at the table of misery. The chemical imbalance theory may have been the greatest marketing heist in modern history. For more than 40 years, Big Pharma told people that sadness was simply a serotonin deficiency, like a car running low on oil. It was the perfect sales pitch. It removed existential questions and replaced them with a prescription. But in 2022, a major review from University College London challenged the entire narrative. The researchers found no consistent evidence proving that low serotonin directly causes depression. In other words, they didn't discover a chemical imbalance in your brain. They created a financial imbalance in your bank account. And now, the business has moved directly into your pocket. Digital therapy apps aren't designed to heal you. They're designed to maximize your LTV, your lifetime value. In the language of venture capital, your trauma is recurring revenue. Their algorithms study your behavior, monitor your vulnerability, and send notifications exactly when you're emotionally exposed. Not to save you, but to keep you engaged. Because every moment of loneliness becomes another opportunity for monetization. They aren't acting like healers anymore. They're becoming data dealers in white coats, using your darkest thoughts to inflate quarterly earnings.
So why are the United States and the United Kingdom among the most medicated societies on Earth, yet also among the loneliest? Because you cannot medicate a collapsing culture. You cannot talk your way out of economic despair. You cannot meditate away a life where rent consumes 70% of your energy, your future, and your soul. The industry functions like a psychological decoy. It keeps you hyper-focused on your inner wounds, so you never look up and notice the systemic chains around your wrists. They want you endlessly analyzing your childhood, while they quietly strip mine your future in broad daylight. Because once you realize that your diagnosis is nothing more than a product ID, you'll finally understand why the elites prefer you heavily sedated. Who actually benefits from a nation addicted to Xanax? Ask yourself this. Is it easier to control a population that is angry, awake, and organized? Or one that is sedated, isolated, and endlessly obsessed with itself? Because if you're too busy managing your generalized anxiety, you're too exhausted to organize resistance. If you're trapped in endless therapy sessions about your inner child, you stop questioning why elites are buying entire neighborhoods, entire cities, and eventually, entire futures. The mental health industrial complex isn't just medicine. It's the modern version of bread and circuses. Except this time, instead of bread, they hand you Prozac to keep you quiet inside the cage. Look closely at what's happening to the next generation. In the United States, children are being labeled with ADHD at rates that feel less like medicine and more like a societal malfunction. We tell kids they have a disorder because they struggle to sit still for 8 hours a day under fluorescent lights, staring at screens, inside windowless rooms. But maybe the child isn't broken. Maybe the environment is. Instead of questioning the system, we medicate the symptoms. And by drugging children early, we aren't helping them adapt to life. We're training them to accept an unnatural world as normal. A chemically neutralized workforce before they even reach puberty. Corporations now offer wellness days instead of livable wages. They'll pay for your meditation app while freezing your salary, cutting your benefits, and draining every ounce of your energy. It's the ultimate form of gaslighting. You're not exhausted because the system is broken. You're exhausted because you haven't practiced enough mindfulness. Notice the trick. They don't want to remove the abuse. They want to modify your reaction to the abuse so the machine can continue operating without resistance. An endless loop of exploitation, running at the total expense of your sanity. We traded communities for clinicians. There was a time when people leaned on neighbors, elders, friends, and family. Now, we lean on paid professionals reading from diagnostic manuals. We outsourced empathy to an industry that profits from keeping people emotionally dependent. The village disappeared. And in its place, they sold you a lonely room, a webcam, and a monthly subscription. Loneliness became a commodity. Isolation became a business model.
and people are paying for it with their lives. But the most dangerous lie was never that you were sick. It's the cure they're about to sell you next.
But here's the twist that should keep you awake tonight. What if your depression isn't a malfunction? What if your anxiety was never a disorder to begin with? Think about it carefully. If you locked a human being inside a dark room, fed them garbage, isolated them from real connection, and forced them to work endlessly for survival, would they feel happy? Of course not. They would feel exhausted, trapped, and hopeless. And that misery wouldn't be irrational. It would be the only sane response to an insane situation. Your brain is not broken. It's screaming. It's trying to warn you that this lifestyle, the concrete boxes, the digital isolation, the endless scrolling, the artificial routines, is poisoning something deep inside you. But the industry labels it clinical depression because fixing the signal is easier than fixing the system creating the noise. They don't want to extinguish the fire. They just want to silence the smoke alarm. And your pain? Your pain may be the last untouched part of you, the final piece that still refuses to surrender to the machine. The version of happiness they sold you was never freedom. It was a cage with soft lighting. They taught you that a healthy person is someone who stays productive, compliant, emotionally controlled, and permanently smiling. But think about that for a second. A perfectly adjusted person inside a deeply sick society may actually be the sickest person of all. Because every time you try to erase your sadness completely, you risk killing your intuition. You silence the very instinct inside you that knows something is wrong. All this time, you were taught to fight your own shadow, while the real enemy was the person selling you the light. So stop trying to repair yourself for a world that was never designed for your soul. Maybe your anxiety is an internal compass begging you to run from what's destroying you. Maybe your depression is your spirit refusing to cooperate any longer. A silent strike against a life that no longer feels human. The system doesn't truly fear your sadness. It fears your clarity. Because the moment someone recognizes their pain as a valid protest, they become impossible to fully control. So maybe the real question was never, how do I return to normal? Maybe the real question is, why would you ever want to be normal in a world like this? But before you throw away the pills and delete your therapist's number, you need to see what happens to the people who actually wake up. The invoice is finally due. You can keep paying for the subscription to happiness, hoping that one day the therapist finally says something that makes the world feel bearable. You can keep swallowing pills that soften the colors of your life, just so you don't have to stare directly into the gray. But understand this clearly. Every hour spent endlessly managing symptoms is an hour not spent changing the conditions that created those symptoms in the first place. And the longer you stay trapped in that cycle, the more you begin subsidizing your own imprisonment. We now live in a culture that treats feeling deeply as a disease and emotional numbness as the definition of success. They want you to believe that being a hero means overcoming your struggle, so you can return to being a productive unit inside the machine. But maybe that isn't courage at all. Maybe real courage belongs to the people who looked directly at the machine, felt the crushing weight of it, and refused to call that weight normal. The real heroes were never the ones perfectly cured by the system. They were the ones who realized that their sadness felt more honest than the system's artificial version of joy. So now you face a final choice. You can go back to the couch next Tuesday. You can keep telling yourself that your trauma alone is the reason your life feels empty. Or you can recognize that the world itself is fractured. Your pain is valid, and your so-called disorder may actually be the beginning of clarity. Because the elites don't truly want people to become well. They want people to become manageable, predictable, controllable. And the moment you stop trying to be manageable, you become something the system can no longer calculate. You become dangerous. So ask yourself one final question. Are you fighting for a cure? Or are you fighting for a different world? Is your therapist truly your healer? Or simply the landlord of your mind? It's time to choose. If you believe the couch was always a cage, type awake in the comments. If you still believe the system exists to protect you, type safe. But choose carefully, because the machine is always watching, and machines prefer their victims silent, obedient, and asleep. The next video will show you where the exit is hidden. But first, you have to decide whether you're truly ready to leave.